What's a good use case for eggplants? No, I'm not talking about sending eggplant emojis. I'm going to show you how to make Eggplant Bhaji instead. Welcome to another episode of Homemade, where I teach you how to cook authentic Bangladeshi recipes at home. Today we're making Eggplant Bhaji, a super simple sauteed vegetable dish that's spicy, savory, and has a whole lot of eggplant. Alright, so once you're done playing with your eggplant, let's go ahead and prep it. You want to cut off the ends for stabilization and then cut that in half to make it a bit more manageable. I like cutting the sides off and shaping it into a rectangle. It makes dicing the eggplant into even-sized pieces a whole lot easier. You want to aim for about half-inch planks that you end up cutting into even-sized cubes. Remember, even-sized pieces means even cooking. Toss the eggplants into a baking sheet, give it a good glug of olive oil and a couple of pinches of kosher salt and fresh cracks of pepper, and pop that in the oven for about 25 to 30 minutes at 350. And you should get something like this. Soft but not mushy pieces of eggplant. Just set that to the side and let it cool. Alright, let's go ahead and prep our onions next. You want to peel and finely dice 2 medium-sized red onions. I like using red onions for this dish because it adds an extra bite. Once you're done, set that to the side. I'm adding in 1 chunky sized Yukon gold potato into the bhaji. Look at that thick boy. The potatoes add extra starch and additional texture that complements the softness of the eggplant. You don't want all of the ingredients to be mushy. You can also add in other vegetables here like carrots, parsnips, or even cauliflower. Peel the skin, cut the ends, and dice the potato into a 1/4-inch cube like this, and set that to the side in water. Alright, for our heat component, I'm using 4 to 6 green bird's eye chilies. If you can't find these, you can substitute a couple of serranos or even jalapenos. Rip off the stems and cut them on a bias and set that to the side. Garlic is a staple ingredient in Bengali cuisine. You can never have enough. Let's go ahead and break off 46 cloves, peel the cloves and give it a good smash, and finally mince the garlic and set that to the side. Next up, we're adding in tomatoes to add acidity to balance out the bhaji. I'm dicing up 2 medium-sized Roma tomatoes here. Cut off the stems and give it a good dice until you have even-sized pieces and set that aside. For our garnish, take a fresh bunch of cilantro, wrap it tight, and give it a fine dice. Alright, for our spices, we have a mix of both dried and powdered. I'm using 2 dried red chilies, de-seeded, half a tablespoon of mustard seeds, and half a tablespoon of cumin seeds. We're going to go and temper these shortly. Next up, we have our powdered spices. Start with 1 tablespoon of chili powder, 1 tablespoon of coriander powder, half a tablespoon of curry powder, 1 tablespoon of cumin powder, and finally half a tablespoon of turmeric powder. Heat up a fry pan on medium-high heat and add in 2 to 3 tablespoons of olive oil, or enough to coat the bottom of the pan, and let that get hot. Next up, we're going to temper our spices and let the essential oils release. Toss in the dried red chilies, mustard seeds, and whole cumin. Give that a good mix for about 30 seconds or until the seeds start to pop. Toss in the garlic next and mix well with the whole spices. Let that get fragrant for about 45 seconds before we add in the onions. Saute the onions for at least 2 to 3 minutes or until they get translucent and the sugar starts to release and start browning. Toss in the chilies next and give that a quick stir. In goes the tomatoes. Now these are going to add a ton of color and acidity to the dish. Try to cook out as much moisture from the tomatoes as you can. Just keep stirring and let the tomatoes simmer in its own juices. I'm also adding in a couple of pinches of kosher salt to taste. Next up, add in all of the powdered spices into the onion and tomato paste. Cook out the rawness of the spices on low heat so you don't burn them. Add in a splash of water if things get a little too dry, and let the spices and onion paste soak up all the liquid and just continue to simmer for at least 10 minutes. Eventually the water will evaporate and you'll end up with this delicious and savory onion and tomato paste. Go ahead and add in the potatoes next. You want to give that a thorough mix and make sure everything is evenly coated with the spicy tomato paste. Let that cook for at least 10 minutes with the lid on. Most of the moisture should have cooked out by now and you end up with this spicy coat covering the potatoes. Give that a good stir to make sure they don't stick to the bottom of the pan. I'm also adding in 2 generous pinches of kosher salt to taste. Remember, it's always important to season as you add in more ingredients. And finally, let's add in the cooked eggplants. All we're doing here is combining all the ingredients and giving it a thorough mix to make sure everything is coated evenly with the tomato onion paste. You You want to fold in the eggplant with the potatoes gently and not overtly mix everything. Otherwise, you'll end up breaking them apart and turning them into mush. Dig in with your spatula and fold gently. Cook that through for another 5 minutes or so, or until the potatoes are fully cooked. And that pretty much wraps up the eggplant bhaji. It's super easy to make. All we have to do now is add in the finishing touches. Let's go ahead and garnish with a few generous pinches of cilantro and give that a final stir. I also like to finish this dish with a few knobs of unsalted butter. This is totally optional, but I love the extra layer of flavor and additional sheen the butter adds to the dish. Ghee is also a solid alternative if you have that. And finally, I like to finish this dish with a lemon wedge. The extra acidity helps balance out the spices and the fat. And that's eggplant bhaji. Spicy, savory, and packed with veggies. You can eat this over a bed of rice, but I like pairing this with a few parathas. I like the flaky texture of the paratha, and you can just grab a bite and dig into it with your hands. I also added in some homemade pickled red onions for extra color. I hope you make this dish. It's really easy to prepare and makes for an awesome vegan-friendly weeknight meal. You can also customize it and add in whatever veggies you'd like. Let me know what you think in the comments below and consider subscribing. I'll see you next time on Homemade.